Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into a space that is deeply profound and visually evocative. We're going to be looking at the writings of Christy Lynn Anderson. She's a visual artist and writer who documented this absolutely breathtaking journey through profound grief, unimaginable darkness, and ultimately a fierce spiritual resilience. Now, this isn't just your standard story about surviving a hardship. It is this intricate, layered exploration of how we process trauma, how faith and hope actually intervene as literal forces in our lives, and, maybe most importantly, how a mother goes about deliberately constructing a daughter's legacy of inner strength. It's a somber narrative for sure, but as you'll see, it's also intensely curious and ultimately triumphant.
Okay, let's just dive right into this. Anderson writes, "My genes have lived and now carry on with their own well." Throughout her writings, she plays around beautifully with this concept of blue jeans. It's a really clever double meaning, right? She's referencing both the blue denim jeans we wear every day and the actual genetic lineage we pass down to our kids. This sets the whole stage for her poetic exploration of motherhood. She's acknowledging that her life force, complete with every single one of its hardships, is being passed forward. But her ultimate goal here is to make absolutely sure that the heavy burdens she had to carry are transformed into a powerful, unbreakable legacy for her children. But, to really grasp the heights of this legacy, we first have to understand the deepest depths of her struggle. Because before the triumph, there was the descent. In her notes, Anderson describes falling into what she calls a bottomless pit of grief. She felt as though she had literally died from her aliveness, just completely disconnected from the reality going on around her. She calls this devastating state the nothing. It was this emotional paralysis where the sheer weight of her trauma dragged her into a corridor of complete silence and absolute isolation.
To wrap our heads around human survival, we really have to look at the massive contrast happening here. On the outside, her physical reality was terrifying. She describes her body as an empty, hollow container. She couldn't speak, she couldn't hear, she couldn't express a single emotion. But internally, her mind knew exactly what was going on. Deep inside, totally hidden from the nothing, she protected this tiny spark of light. She actually consciously used her ego to emit a quiet, faint vibration. She kept it just low enough so the darkness couldn't detect it, but alive enough to keep her tethered to existence. She essentially hid in plain sight within her own mind, which is just incredible. And this unimaginable state, it didn't just last for a few hours. We're talking 14 agonizing days. For 2 full weeks, she was trapped as this empty container. She writes about these heartbreaking moments when her children would come up to her. She could see their lips moving. She knew they were saying, "Mommy, I love you. Mommy, are you okay?" But she couldn't hear the sound and she couldn't speak back to them. The grief literally tried to use her children's voices to pull her even deeper into the pit. But instead, she focused fiercely on that tiny spark, using the memory of their pure, loving joy to anchor herself.
And then, boom, the turning point. And it wasn't some gradual shift, it was explosive. By concentrating entirely on that single spark of life, she triggered a miraculous intervention. As she writes, "Hope swept in and stole me from the hands of grief." The darkness simply wasn't powerful enough to maintain its grip on her anymore. She describes rising out of that paralysis suddenly and completely, like a champagne bottle popped open on New Year's Eve. Hope didn't just help her, it actively intervened, wielding what she calls God's invisible sword of light to cut her totally free.
When you map out the timeline of this spiritual rescue, it's pretty striking. From 14 days of absolute silent entrapment, it took just a single moment of concentrating on that vital spark to change everything. That moment swept her into what she calls the river of hope. She describes herself like drifting wood, just being carried safely by this river straight into the hands of faith. And the result of this massive rescue? It's a lifetime commitment. Having survived the ultimate darkness, she emerges reborn, dedicating the rest of her entire existence to serving as a light bearer, someone who is committed to bringing truth, compassion, and continuous renewal to the lost souls of the world. So, the big question is, how on earth do you protect that hard-won peace once you're actually back out in the real world? Well, Anderson introduces this fascinating concept she calls sound sensitivity. Now, she isn't just talking about physical hearing here. She frames sound sensitivity as a protective cognitive shield. It is a state of hyper-awareness that lets you consciously reflect and deflect what she calls uninspired low-frequency waves. Basically, she means the negative, degenerative energies and judgments of other people. It's this highly relatable, brilliant way to visualize setting strict mental and emotional boundaries. So the absolutely crucial point here is how we actually apply this acoustic shield. Anderson breaks it down into actionable steps.
First up, you have to evaluate and treat people as multicultural, loved, genius beings of light. You always start from a place of supreme compassion. Secondly, you maintain that high vibration hyper-awareness. Third, when you inevitably encounter negativity, those low-frequency waves we talked about, you actively deflect them. Why? Well, step 4, because if you don't, those negative waves will literally degenerate your humane cognitive functions, meaning your core behavioral responses. You have to bounce the negativity away to preserve your mental well-being and keep your environment harmonious.
And her notes give us a beautifully simple real-world example of what this shield looks like in everyday life. Picture an old man with a walking cane slowly crossing a really busy intersection. The low-frequency response, the one you have to deflect, is impatience. It's passing a bit of swearing criticism just because he's slowing you down. But the high-frequency response, the real light-bearer response, is realizing that patience is love and restraint. Instead of frustration, you applaud his bravery. You actively choose gratitude. And that simple shift raises the vibrational energy of your entire community.
All right, let's shift gears and look at the ultimate climax of this whole journey, her children. All of this boundary setting, all of this intense healing, it all has a singular, fierce purpose: building that daughter's legacy of inner strength. As a mother who endured homelessness, trauma, and profound grief, she is absolutely 100% determined to ensure her past struggles never spill over. She wants to create a clean slate, a protective barrier, so that her history does not spoil the new quest of intelligence and goodwills that her 2 daughters are embarking on. She actually visualizes their future in this surreal, totally dreamlike poem called E-Ride, where she watches her daughters, who she joyfully calls the Queens of the Blue Jeans, fearlessly take off into the world. Her first daughter, Baby Blue Eyes, rides confidently from the St. Clair River out to the Okanagan, holding the very leash of the seas. Then, her second daughter, Baby Cheeks, arrives on the scene, cheering and literally roping a winged white horse. It is this spectacular, triumphant vision of absolute independence. She's just watching them fly high into eternity, perfectly safe and wildly capable. But right in the middle of this epic vision, she has this beautifully humbling realization. Anderson writes that she eventually realized her oldest daughter actually possessed an older soul. Her daughters knew the truth of life all along. They were already navigating their paths beautifully, and their lives weren't hers to brag about or try to control. In a really profound moment of letting go, she recognizes that she wasn't the master architect of their destiny. She was simply the student and the guide who just got tagged to help them along the way. Which brings us right to this incredibly powerful, celebratory climax. She proudly declares, "The power and glory are written in my own blue jeans." She is screaming freely, honoring her own autonomy and the fierce strength of her lineage. The poem concludes with her daughters flying up into the sky, turning back to say, "Hi, Mom, see you in eternity." And as she lays her head down, completely at peace, having successfully passed on this unshakable legacy, she asks one final, incredibly poetic question: was that just a dream? It's a truly stunning journey from the silent depths of the nothing, all the way to the vibrant, high-flying freedom of the Queens of the Blue Jeans. By choosing hope and by actively shielding her mind with sound sensitivity, Anderson broke the cycle of trauma and forged a path of light. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to turn this profound journey of setting boundaries and building generational resilience back over to you. When you look at the energy you deflect on a daily basis and the light you choose to nurture, what legacy of inner strength are you writing into your own story?